We have only 2 more opportunities to predict the winner of Survivor 48 before the finale. Over the course of the season, we have been analyzing the edit in order to predict what will happen later in the season. And now we are getting down to brass tacks with only 6 players remaining in the game. However, I am just as up in the air as I have ever been with my expectations. So I'm going to have to do what Survivor 48 can't and make some big moves in order to predict who I think is going to win the season. Real quick before we get into the Edgic, I wanted to promote that I was on a season of Survivor Northwestern, and the first episode just came out this week. It's called Into the Gauntlet, and I have dedicated a ton of time and effort, not just into playing on the season, but also in the post-production of the season. So it would mean a lot to me if you went and just checked out the first episode, give it a shot. And it's also been a dream of mine for a few years at this point to have someone analyze the Edgic and the Contender Rankings of the season. So if anyone out there is interested enough to do that and maybe post it on the Edgic subreddit or just send it to me directly, anyone that does, I'll probably give a shout out in a future video. So it would really mean a lot and warm my heart if you did that. So anyways, let's get into the Edgic of the episode. And if you don't know how Edgic works, basically Edgic stands for Edit Logic, and it is basically a system used to analyze the edit of every single character in an episode of Survivor in order to predict how far they will go in the season. Every episode, we give a specific rating to each and every character on the show, and those ratings are divided into a few different categories that determine how we give them a specific rating. The first category is the type of edit. You can either be UTR, which stands for under the radar. You didn't see very much of that character. It can be MOR, which stands for middle of the road, which means you saw some of them, but they weren't super fleshed out. They can be CP, which stands for complex personality, which means you saw a good amount of them and they were pretty fleshed out. Or they can be OTT, which stands for over the top, which means you saw way too much of them and they were like a characterized version of themselves. The second part of the Edgic rating is the tone. It can either be P for positive leaning tone, N for negative leaning tone, M for mixed tone, a little bit of both categories, or it can be just no letter, no extra letter, just a blank spot for a neutral edit, no tone leaning one way or the other. And finally, the number in the Edgic rating is basically just a visibility scale from 1 to 5 on how much screen time they got in the episode. 1 meaning they barely got any screen time at all. 5 meaning they got a lot of screen time. And so, with all that said, let's talk about episode 11 of Survivor. And boom, baby, we are back on track. Mary getting voted out like I predicted. Last week I've been predicting for weeks that I thought Mary was getting voted out next. So I'm super excited to finally get another win under my belt. I'm feeling a little bit more confident. And we go into a final 6 that I think is pretty interesting, right? My argument for a lot of the season has been that even a losing finalist kind of has to have something built up in their edit that feels like, well, maybe they have a shot, or at least they had like some kind of clear edit journey that makes sense that they would be in the finals, right? And some people just don't even really get enough to have that. And I think that Mary was kind of the last person that I was like, Mary wasn't even a believable losing finalist to me. Her edit was so like underdone, underbaked that I thought there's no way that Mary even makes the finals. And so honestly, as much as I am sad to lose Mary here, I do think she was a very fun character and I feel very bad for her on the season. I wish things went better for her, but I'm happy in terms of Edgic because it means that this final 6 is a little bit more exciting because it is a little bit more up in the air in terms of who left could win or who left could make it to the finals, because Mary was the last person that I really thought didn't even have a shot to be a losing finalist. So we have a very interesting final 6. Now, Mary's edit, I am a little bit confused because I feel like, look, she got 7th place, much like, spoilers for Survivor 45 and pretty much any season in the new era, such a similar story to Emily Flippin. Comes from the disaster tribe. The whole tribe gets like totally wiped out. The second to last remaining member being the first member of the jury, and then the last, really rootable underdog of that tribe goes on to get 7th place. Right? Very similar story, and so I'm surprised that Mary's edit was so underbaked. And though my only thought is that maybe they just didn't really want to retrace their steps. They did the Emily thing in that season, and they also had Andy last season, which was a different story, but that similar type of story arc, even if different situation. So, I mean, it's either that or, I know that Mary has talked about that she was really beat down out there, just really knew she was on the outs. Nobody was even talking to her or giving her the time of day, which I feel very bad about. And I think that maybe she just wasn't really giving much in the confessionals at that point. She just was so out of it, So, whatever it is, I think that Mary had a strange edit. I feel like Mary could have been a much bigger character, a much more focal point of the season than she was. But, here she goes out. Like I expected, I said last week, 7th place. Carson also said last week, 7th place. And apparently, way back when I had Josiah on the show, he also predicted that Mary would get 7th place. So Mary was just giving big 7th place vibes, I guess. In terms of this episode, that's mostly my general thoughts. I'll definitely get a lot more into ranting in the contender rankings, but for right off the bat, there's really not a whole lot to say. I think that this season is kind of just, as a lot of people have said, it's not the most crazy. So there's not a whole lot that needs to be, really broken down or talked about. I'm still having fun with it. I've been a defender of the season for a long time, but I do think in terms of like talking about things have been a little bit stagnant. So there's not like a lot of craziness that I need to talk about. So let's get into the Edgic for Mary in the episode. This was definitely a bigger episode for Mary. She got quite a bit of screen time. I definitely feel like, she was a big focal point in this episode. I felt like it was pretty obvious Mary was getting voted out. Honestly, I know that they tried to add some tension of, they're going to vote out Joe. It's going to be a big move. And so I've seen a lot of people really thinking Joe's going to vote out. I never thought Joe was getting voted out. I mean, I was tense about it, but I was kind of like, this really felt like the visibility spike that you would expect from Mary in the episode where she gets voted out. So, not that surprised in that regard. Now, in terms of her rating, I would probably go complex personality. I'm interested. Let's take a look at Rob's fact checker confessional charts. She got 6 confessionals in the episode. That's not that much. But I still felt like she was a big presence in the episode. So I'm thinking I'll probably give her a 4 in terms of tone. Oh, not in terms of tone, in terms of visibility. In terms of tone, I'm conflicted. I would say either negative or mixed. I'm trying to think if there was like anything really positive about Mary in this episode. I mean, I felt like she was fun and she was kind of a scrappy underdog, but I really just think there's a lot of people really not talking good about her, calling her chaotic, calling her, she's eating all the coconuts, they want her out. This was a very negative tone episode, I think, for Mary. So I think I'm going to grab this rating and give her a complex personality -4 in this episode. Unfortunate for Mary, but we salute you. We stand for Mary. So let's get into the contender rankings for everyone else. Hop up to the top of the list and go all the way down in alphabetical order. Let's talk about Eva in this episode, her rating. I feel like Eva was in the episode quite a bit. She, went on the journey. She also went on the rewards. So she got a lot of content in that regard. I don't really feel like she had a whole lot outside of those scenes that I recall in terms of like talking strategy and whatnot. I don't think there was a lot there, but she definitely did get a pretty good amount of screen time. So I'm thinking I'm gonna go. I don't think there was tone in Eva's edit this episode. I feel like, there was a little bit of like, oh, Eva's being really, really blunt about going on the journey. I guess Eva was like upset about Mary breaking open the coconuts. That was a scene. So there's a little bit there, but I feel like not like that much substance there necessarily. So I kind of think either a complex personality, toneless 3, or maybe a 4. She did, if we look at the confessionals chart, she did get 13 confessionals, which is quite a bit. So I feel like I probably should give her a 4 for that reason. I think that's fair, especially, as we dwindle down the numbers in the season, makes, people are generally going to get more screen time. So you try to adjust it proportionately, but there's only so much you can do. So yeah, I think complex personality tone is 4 for Eva is fine. As for Joe had a very interesting episode this week. Joe was in it a lot. This episode was very, very Joe focused. A lot of talking about how Joe's the biggest threat in the game. He's running the season. Pretty much almost everyone had a confessional in this episode talking about how Joe is running away with the game, and if we don't do anything about it, he's going to win because he's the biggest threat. So that is really good for Joe. The one thing that is like bad for Joe was the Shauhin segment where Shauhin was like talking, like getting irritated by Joe and fed up about Joe's paranoia. I'm pretty sure Shauhin was the only one that really talked about that, and we'll get into this a little bit more in the contenders. But I also think Shauhin's kind of proven to be like an unreliable narrator. Like I feel like Shauhin's kind of off the mark and not on the same page as a lot of other people pretty often in this season. So for the only negativity towards Joe in the episode to come from Shauhin, it doesn't feel that weighted to me. It feels, it doesn't feel like it's that bad for him. But I do think it's enough to probably give him a mixed tone. So we're actually going to hop over. I'm going to break out a new rating that we haven't used at all yet this season, and I'm very excited to get to use. We're going to give Joe an over-the-top mixed rating. And it's a 3 or it's a 4. I don't really feel like he was actually in the episode all that much, but there was a lot of talking about Joe. So I might give it a 4, honestly. Yeah, I just think it was such a Joe-focused episode to me that I think I gotta give it a 4. So yeah, a mixed tone episode for Joe, but I still think it's generally, generally a good episode for Joe. Kamilla. Great episode for Kamilla. She got a lot of content. She got, I think, like 11 confessionals. She also won the challenge, and she went on the reward. And once again, like every freaking episode, we have to hear about how incredibly secret her alliance with Kyle is. They're the most secret alliance in the history of Survivor. Don't you guys know that? Do you get it? Do you get that Kyle and Kamilla are the most secret alliance in the history of Survivor? Can you believe it? Nobody knows that they're aligned. Wow, it's crazy. I had no idea. David knew. David freaking knew. They can't be that secret. Oh, gosh. I'm honestly, y'all know that I like Kyle and Kamilla a lot. I do. I've not been like on there. I've been on the Loggy team here, right? I've been on the Joe and Eva team over the Kyle and Kamilla team. But even then, I'm fed up with Kyle and Kamilla. Because at least Joe and Eva, when they talk about each other and they have strategy talks, they do something. They make a decision to say, this is who we're voting out, and then they do it. That like it has some sort of weight to it. When Kyle and Kamilla talk, it's the same shiz every time. It's We're the most secret alliance in the game. Nobody knows we're working together. That's it. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't mean anything. They don't influence the game at all. It's ticking me off, man. Freaking do something, guys. Either do something or stop telling us about your alliance, because I don't care that much. I know you're aligned. I don't need it repeated every episode. That was maybe not the right time for that tangent, but I had to go on it. Kamilla, great episode for Kamilla. It's a great episode for Kamilla. Yeah, I'd probably give her a complex personality positive 4. Good episode, Kamilla. Good for you. Okay. Kyle, as I said, I think this is also a complex personality. I think I'll give it a 3. I don't think that Kyle felt as important to this episode. He definitely got some big segments earlier on with that whole, breaking down crying segment. And then again, hey, did you know that Kyle and Kamilla are aligned and it's a secret and no one knows about it? It's incredible. I mean, that was really a big tidbit of information I did not see coming in this episode. But yeah, I think this was also a positive episode for Kyle. He breaks down crying. He talks about how, he wants to provide for his family and he doesn't want to betray anyone or hurt anyone. So yeah, good episode for Kyle. Mitch, I'm honestly tempted to give Mitch an under the radar here. I really don't remember a lot of Mitch in this episode. The most I can remember of Mitch is him saying that Joe is the biggest threat in the game and that they need to make a move, but then they don't. Other than that, I don't even know where Mitch was. I really have no idea. He went on the reward, I guess. But I just feel like he was such in the background here. I think I'm going to give him an under the radar too. Could be a middle of the road too. I think I would give him a 2 for visibility. It's under the radar or middle of the road either way, but it wasn't a lot. He felt really in the background here. And for Shauhin, it's a complex personality. It's either going to be mixed or toneless, probably. I might honestly just go toneless because although I felt like I did not like this episode for Shauhin and I got negative vibes from him, I do think that's just a personal bias. I don't really think that's, not that I dislike Shauhin, I just feel like that's how I felt about what he was saying in the episode. I don't necessarily think that that's what the edit was presenting. And I've always, thought that in my ratings and my contenders, I'm trying to look at what the edit is telling us, not necessarily about my personal feelings, even though my personal feelings are going to influence a lot. But I think a toneless, maybe a toneless 3 rating here, complex personality 3 toneless for Shauhin in this episode. He was there, he got screen time, but it didn't feel like crazy. He had the scene complaining about Joe. He had the scene talking to Kamilla about how he thinks that he can beat Joe, stuff like that. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Shauhin. So, that's about it for the Edgic Ratings. Not a whole lot to discuss. I don't think I really had to blow up with Kamilla. But really, the juice of this week and of this episode is in the contenders. So, let's take a look at our contender rankings for the episode. Mary has been in last place for a while. Finally going out. Makes a lot of sense. But it also means we have a little bit of a more difficult decision to make in this contender rankings. And listen, I'm going to do what the players on this season aren't doing, and everyone's complaining. I'm going to make some big moves. We're going to see some really freaking big moves in this contender rankings today, people. So pay attention. And firstly, this is not really a big move, but it's something that is a change for me. I'm moving Mitch to the bottom. Yeah, Mitch is at the bottom. I think this was another background episode for Mitch. I think he needs to be way more vocal in the episodes if he's gonna win. And he's just not at this point. I just don't think he has the narrative. And I had pretty much ruled Mitch out like pre-merge. If we look way back what is this, episode 6. I bumped him all the way down to 3rd from the bottom because I was like, he was losing his narrative and it just was not there. I would say like he went up for a while because he does get a lot of positive tone and other people were like just getting faultier edits. And I've kind of defended Mitch because I'm a little bit like, I don't really know how they're supposed to edit Mitch. Like, if Mitch wins, like, what do? He's not in the alliance. He's not making any moves. Like, what do you give him other than just being a really likable guy, which they have shown. So, I mean, I do not think it's impossible for Mitch to win. It would be very strange. But I'm not, like, out on Mitch. I'm really not out on any of these 6. But it's looking pretty bad for Mitch at this point in terms of his winner potential in the edit. And then now that's the easy part. Okay, that's the easy part that I thought Mitch is going down to the bottom. The next part is a lot crazier. Okay, because I have an instinct about what I want to do here, which is crazy. It might be crazy to some people out there, but I'm going to do it. I put Shauhin at 2nd from the bottom. Sorry, Ren Davis. Shauhin's going down. Listen, I have so many thoughts on Shauhin and Shauhin in this episode and so many thoughts about what's up with him. But mostly the maniacal laugh comes from that last week. I just felt peer pressured by people online. I saw so many people in the Edgic community putting Shauhin so high, saying he's definitely one of the options to win this season. And I think at this point, this episode, it's not that bad for him. And I still think that a lot of what I'm about to say and a lot of his content in this episode still could lead towards a Shauhin win. I'm not out on it, right? But I've seen a lot of people dumping Shauhin. The Shauhin truthers are jumping ship, okay? The Shauhin Devarmy is going down, okay? And even Ren Davis was jumping off the roller coaster this week. And I have many thoughts. Shauhin probably has the most interesting edit of anyone, and so I got the most to talk about. What I really did not like from Shauhin in this episode, well, there was 2 things, but the first thing was him complaining about Joe being paranoid, which just felt a little bit like yes, okay, sure. I mean, should Joe have been paranoid? I guess not. But also, I was like, dude, chill out. Like, whatever, you know? I mean, maybe Joe was getting more paranoid than we saw, but I also just didn't, just kind of, I didn't love that confessional from Shauhin. It wasn't bad, though. But the thing that really I had problems with in terms of Shauhin's contender potential is when he says, everyone is saying Joe is the biggest threat in the game, but I think I've played a better game than him. Okay. Now, could that be leading towards a Shauhin win, and that's setting up why Shauhin beats Joe, or he beats him in fire making and then wins at the end, or just beats Joe directly in the final 3? Maybe. Like, it's certainly possible, but it just read to me so much as, once again, Shauhin is off the mark from where everyone else is. We saw confessionals from Mitch, from Mary, from Kamilla, from Kyle, all saying in this episode, Joe is the biggest threat in the game. If Joe is at the end, he will run away with this. We have to get out Joe. And then Shauhin is on his own saying, I'm playing a better game than Joe. And it's just, we haven't heard anyone else say that about Shauhin. It's just not there. It really feels like, again, Shauhin just having a bad read and just being delusional about where things are going. I saw someone on Reddit make a really keen observation last week about Shauhin, in that nobody's ever actually called Shauhin a threat or that Shauhin is going to win the game. The SPV, the player perspective that we've heard people talking about Shauhin, has always been Shauhin is sneaky, or Shauhin is strategic, or he's untrustworthy, which is not necessarily leading towards a Shauhin win. It's more just like Shauhin needs to get targeted at some point. And so that, I think, combined with the many instances of just seemingly delusion from Shauhin, I feel like is really not looking good for him. And I do think he has an edit with a lot of, care in it, I suppose. And he has gotten a lot of screen time, but he just does not feel like the focal point of this season to me. He feels like he's just kind of ended up off to the side a little bit. He's still there. He's still getting a lot of screen time, but I just feel like he's not really part of the narrative. Even Mitch, I think, has been more part of the narrative than Shauhin has. And in terms of his instances of being wrong, this episode, every person says Joe is the biggest threat in the game. Shauhin says, I'm playing a better game than Joe. Off the mark from what everyone else is saying. Shauhin says, I've got Kamilla. I think I can form an alliance with her. Cut to Kamilla saying that she wants Shauhin out and doesn't trust him. A bad read. Shauhin says, I feel fine. I think that Kyle and Kamilla were never going to write my name down. Meanwhile, Kyle and Kamilla were the two people that were most pitching to write Shauhin's name down. They were who wanted him out, and everyone else had to talk them out of it. A terrible read. Shauhin says, I don't think that Kyle has an idol. And then Kyle plays an idol. Shauhin says, I think we need to worry about Eva going on this journey to Joe. And Joe says, it's not a problem. And then it's not a problem. It's been time and time again where Shauhin has been confident and wrong. And the comparison I want to make about Shauhin's edit at this point and where I kind of see it going is he reminds me a lot of a very certain type of edit and character on the show The Traitors. I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you've watched any season of The Traitors, especially non-American seasons that are out there, a lot of times in a lot of seasons, there are faithfuls that are very loud and very confident in their decisions, but completely wrong. And those people go very far in the game. Those are the people that pretty much always go to the end because people don't want to get rid of them because they're so confident in their abilities, but their abilities are off. They're not winning abilities. They're not figuring out who the traitors are. They're completely wrong. And Shauhin feels very similar to that style of character to me from The Traitors. Shauhin feels so confident in so many things that he says, I've got Kamilla. Kyle and Kamilla would never write my name down. I'm playing a better game than Joe. Yada, yada, yada. And yet, he's constantly contradicted. He's wrong. Everything that every single other person in the game is saying is different than what Shauhin is saying. He's on a different page than where every other player is. And I think this is exemplified by, this is not Edgic, but in David's exit press, the word that he said for his association with Shauhin was delusional. And listen, Shauhin could still win. And maybe he could be a winner that was a delusional winner. And, whatnot. But I think delusional was a great word for him because it just feels like he is off the mark. And he's going to the end of the game. Maybe, he could get voted out next, but he's going deep in the game, and then but he's not going to win. He's going to get, just come short because he's so confident and yet so wrong. And all of these thoughts about Shauhin made me reflect on that one scene where, in the David Boot episode, where he had the whole sequence where he says that he has been planting the seeds for voting out David for a long time. And he's responsible for getting David out. And there's that whole montage sequence. And a lot of people at the time said that was a really good scene for him and a really good episode for him. And I was a little bit more skeptical about that episode for Shauhin. And I think that now, reflecting on that, thinking about all these things that have been stacking up, I'm kind of like, was that another instance of Shauhin being delusional? Like, just being wrong? Like, Shauhin didn't really feel responsible for that. There was no, like, buildup. It felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, Shauhin's saying, I've been planting these seeds for weeks about voting out David. And I'm like, you have? Like, when were you responsible for this? I really felt like there was way more buildup. And it made way more sense to give credit to Kyle, to Joe, to Kamilla, to Eva. And then Shauhin has this one segment where him alone in his own confessional is trying to claim credit for the move and say that he's been the one that got David out. And it's like, wait, hold on, really? This was you? And I don't know if any of the players are going to believe that. And I don't know if we were meant to believe that. I think people bought into it in the audience. But reflecting on it now, I'm kind of like, maybe that was meant to be another Shauhin being confident and wrong. Like, he didn't really make that happen. It was really all those other people that made that happen. He thinks that he was, responsible, but he wasn't. And I think that if he's at the end and he tries to claim credit for the David vote out, I think Kyle or Joe or Kamilla are going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, no, not really. You're not responsible for that. Why are you saying that you're responsible for the David vote out? You're taking credit for a thing you didn't really have credit for. And so reflecting on that, I don't even know if that scene was that good for him, honestly. And so it's a big move, but I think that Shauhin is really down on my ranks right now. And I just think that his edit it's just all over the place. And I think he's been very vocal and he's got a lot of screen time, but I just think he's been so loud and wrong that I'm worried about his chances to win. Now, could that change again next week? Absolutely, because this season, edgically, is crazy. And honestly, I'm so glad to be part of doing Edgic for this season because it's made it a lot more fun. I think people that aren't doing Edgic are getting very bored with the season. But if you're doing Edgic and you're following the Edgic, it's been really exciting because it's been all over the place. This is a very chaotic Edgic season, actually. So I'm putting Shauhin second last. And I am, in fact, putting Kamilla. Oops, not there. I meant to put Kamilla in fourth place. Look at Kamilla. She's moved up. She almost was in last place, but she's moved all the way up to fourth now. And the reason for that is this was a very good episode for Kamilla. And I saw someone make a point on Reddit that Kamilla's edit, is kind of Kyle's edit is Kamilla's edit. Kyle's in the power position. He's really involved in more stuff, but what constantly reminded that they're a duo that are in this together and that, sure, Kyle's getting the screen time, but it's also still kind of their story as a duo. And I thought that was a decent argument. And I do think that Kamilla does kind of have she's an under the radar, rootable underdog that's on the outs, but was important earlier on and is still brought up and mentioned a lot in the episodes and has still, felt more like an integral, factor in what's going on than necessarily the amount of content she was getting. So, and I said early on when I had Kamilla as a very high contender, I had her very high for a while, that, Kamilla having an under the radar edit would make a lot of sense, right? She seems like the type of character that would get a kind of under the radar winner edit potentially. So, you know what? I see it. I still don't really believe Kamilla is winning. I'm kind of to the point that I really think it's kind of 3-3 for me, that I'm feeling worse and worse about the 3 on the bottom and better about the 3 on the top. But I will say Kamilla is on the rise, even though I don't really think she's winning because I still think her edit's not that great. This was a big improvement this episode. So that's Kamilla. Now, the top 3 is really tough. It's really tough because honestly, I feel really good about all 3 of these people. And I would I feel like all three of them do deserve the top spot in a lot of ways. But I think I am going to put Kyle in third place. And it hurts. I wanted to move Kyle up this week. I really did. I don't want to put Kyle at number one. Because my main holdup with Kyle has always been that I just think he was on the wrong tribe. I just think the purple tribe was the important tribe. I've always said that Logie has felt more important, and I always have felt like it's going to be a Logie winner, and I could be wrong about that, but that's been my biggest drawback for Kyle. And I think that Kyle has a very good edit, and his edit is very good if he does win this season, and it makes a lot of sense. And I would not be surprised or upset with a Kyle win at all. But my main drawbacks are the tribe and this episode. You know, he of course has that big scene that is both good and not so good for Kyle, where he says that he doesn't want to hurt anybody, and even if it means providing for his family, he doesn't want to hurt people, and he breaks down and he gets to kind of this big crying sequence in the episode. Now, that could be a really good thing for Kyle winning potentially. What a really good scene. What a heartwarming scene for Kyle. However, that scene reminded me a lot of a confessional from Jesse in Survivor 43, where Jesse says, a lot of similar stuff, I believe. He says, I'm playing for my family, and I want to be able to provide for them, provide for my kids. And he kind of breaks down crying a little bit in confessional and talks about how important winning is to him. And I'm pretty sure everybody was like, well, wrap it up. Winner confessional right there. That's the confessional. That means that Jesse's going to win the season. We can squash it. I don't remember at what episode that moment was, but Jesse, that was wrong. Jesse didn't win, right? He came just short. And I'm a little bit like, I just have always felt like Kyle kind of feels in that Jesse spot a little bit to me. And I predicted last week that he'll be fire-making loser. I'm not as confident in that this week as I was last week. But I do still think it's like, I don't know. I just, something's weird about what's going on with Kyle. And the biggest problem is the tribe, and that I do feel like he feels that he's going to end up like a Jesse character. But he might make the finals, and he might win, because he does have a very good edit. So I'm certainly not on Kyle. I wish I could move him up more, but this is where we're at. Now we are to the top two. And I gotta say, I'm really conflicted. I really am. I'm gonna, for the sake of the video, it's gonna spoil, but I'm gonna do contender number 2 first, and then talk all about contender number 1 after. And I don't really believe that this is the right decision, but I want to make big moves, and my heart is just, it's pumping, it's gushing, it's telling me what I want to do. And what I want to do is I want to put Eva at number 2. And listen, the reason for that is I feel like Eva has started to have a little bit of like, I feel like she doesn't get like a ton of SPV recently, which isn't terrible, but I just feel like she also doesn't feel super in it, super involved. She feels a little bit more laid back. I still think she has a very good edit, very vocal, a lot of screen time. But I just think it's become a little bit, it almost reminds me a little bit of Austin in Survivor 45, that like a lot of Eva's content has kind of become like talking about advantages and talking about kind of, like alliance with Joe and whatnot. And I just think that Joe has become the more bigger figure in the season. And that means that I'm putting Big Joe back at number 1, baby. Boom. Yeah. Let's go. All the way back to week 1. Joe was my number 1 contender. And my heart was telling me, I don't know if he's going to be number 1 next week, but I want to put him back at number 1 one last time before the season ends. And so I bumped Joe down last week, and I'm bumping him back up to top contender. And the reason for that is twofold. I think that Joe got so much SPV in this episode about how he's running the game. He's the biggest threat to win. He's, so likable. He's the firefighter. He's the father. He's like this, great guy that, is going to win the game, basically. And listen, did it feel on the nose? Yes. But here's the thing. Joe didn't get voted out this episode. Could it be setting up him getting voted out soon? Maybe, but honestly, I don't even see it. And I think that last week I was really concerned about Joe's jury management and that the jury was going to be kind of pissed at Joe and that he wasn't going to have a good speech at the end, and that's why he wasn't going to win. And I still think that's possible. I still don't really think that Joe's probably going to have a very good pitch in Final Tribal Council. However, this week made me think that maybe it doesn't matter so much. Maybe it doesn't matter so much if people are pissed at Joe. Maybe it doesn't matter so much if he doesn't have that great of a pitch at Final Council, because the perception of the season has become that Joe is the biggest threat. And that is what the story of the season is telling us. This episode, Joe did not get voted out. We did not need to see so much about how Joe is the biggest threat in the game and that he's running the game, right? You didn't really need to have that much. You could. I mean, it's not terrible to put it in, but especially since Joe didn't win the immunity and he didn't get voted out, it wasn't that necessary. I mean, you want a decoy vote, but there was so much focus on how Joe was running the game. And I just think when you build that perception in the jury, I think it's going to start to not matter. If Joe makes it to the end and no one ever takes a shot at him, I can see people being like, hey, you guys are great, but you were supposed to take him out. We all knew he was the biggest threat, and yet you never did it. You never pulled the trigger. You never took him out. He's still here. So we have to vote for him. We're pissed at him. He didn't have great jury management. He's not even giving that great of a speech right now. But he was who you were supposed to get out. That's the perception that the jury has created for themselves, I believe. And that is the narrative that the season is starting to tell us. That they're supposed to take Joe out, and they're not. And I want to go back to the very beginning of the season to give a few old and new reasons why I think that maybe it is Joe that wins this season. So, right off the bat in the premiere, Joe has the most focused on extended Zoom call at the beginning. He gets the first confessional of the season, and he is shown to be extremely positive in the edit, a super positive edit for Joe in the premiere. I think we learn a lot about him right off the bat. He is, shown to be this really positive guy that is, helping people. And we learn about his job, kind of what he does. A lot of really good, strong stuff for Joe in the premiere. And then in episode 2, we learn more about him and his character traits. We are shown that he is sort of in the middle. He is a decision maker for the tribe. Even though, he's not the one helping Star try to decipher the thing or not. He is the one that gets this really focused on scene where he has to be the decision maker of the group on whether he's going to go with Eva or he's going to go with Star. And we see him be decisive, and he says, I am going with Eva. He's shown to be decisive and shown to be someone that is in control. And a leader of sorts. And then in episode 3, we learn a little bit more about his character. We see him be someone that boosts morale. He builds the bonfire. We learn a little bit more about his job and his real life. And we also learn that he's funny and someone that has a really strong social game. And I think that Joe, right off the bat, has the strongest pre-swap of anyone in the game, hands down. I really still believe that. And I think the big thing that I want to focus on here is Joe's family. We learn about that right off the bat, how important that is to him. And I want to hop over, not from Joe, but to look at David at the beginning of the season. And I for a while I was thinking about last week that Joe probably isn't going to win because he doesn't have great jury management, and they're going to be bitter towards him. And I thought, how would David vote for Joe? He's really the one that we're looking at as being like the person that's going to be bitter towards Joe. I thought, why would David vote for Joe? And then it clicked for me. His family. He has shown to need to provide for his family, for his kids. And I go back to the beginning of this season when we got not just one, but multiple times focus on David talking about how he wants to win the $1 million so that he can provide for his family. He wants to start a family and he wants to provide for his kids. And I remember thinking that was such a significant plot line early on that never really came back in any way for David. It didn't feel super important. And David got 9th place, right? He didn't even go that far. He went far, but he didn't, make it to the end, right? And so it's like, why was that important? Well, sometimes, things are included in the edit, not necessarily because it's important for who says it, but it's important for someone else, or it's important for the themes of the season as a whole. And I think that, that being such an important beat that was brought up multiple times for David is maybe not just to show that might be why David would vote for Joe at the end, but to be thematically important for Joe's winning game, about how he needs to provide for his family. That has been the core of his story throughout so much of the season. And I do think that this is a jury that might want to vote along that lines. Maybe he doesn't have the most strategic pitch at the end, but he has been in such a dominant position in the game, and the stakes for him winning the game and getting the money is larger than it is for anyone else. He is the family man of the season. And I look back at those moments from the early game, and I just think Joe has so much good going for him as the potential winner. And maybe all of these negatives that we've seen in the past couple episodes are there just to cause doubt, just to, make us think that it's not obvious when the winner, it actually is the person that we thought it would be all the way back at the beginning, the number one contender at the beginning of this season. And so that's why I'm putting my faith back in Joe. I'm putting Joe back up as my top contender. Now, I'm still not super confident that Joe's going to win. I'm still an EVA believer. Like the EVA believer and the Joe boat, we're on the same boat. We're on the same ship here, right? We're together. All right. And I would be happy with a win from either of them because I think they've both been very dominant. And I think that a Joe win would be fantastic. He's absolutely crushed this season so far. This is one of the most dominant games we've seen in a long time, especially that he's been so open and it's been so obvious. Everyone knows that he's running the game, right? Because at least with D, and I think D played a potentially better game in the respect that she was able to really feel very dominant and run the season, but not be too obvious about it, right? She was able to kind of keep it a little bit low key, so she was able to make it to the end and win. So I think D has maybe played a more impressive game in that regard, but I think Joe's game is impressive in a different way in that it has become so obvious to everyone. And they're still not taking him out. They still feel so bad. He's got a grip on their souls and their social capabilities that they just don't want to vote him out. Exciting, big moves. Giving Joe a big shakeup in the contender rankings this week. A lot of changes. I believe Kyle being the only person that stayed in the same spot. So that is the situation there. So let's grab our contenders, and I'm going to copy and paste them down in the other places. And quickly, before I give my predictions, I want to just take a quick look at that I have the superlatives that each voted out castaway gave to Gordon Holmes in his exit interviews about they gave supposed to give one word, but some they gave phrases about each character. And you can take a look at them here. I'll read them out for each person, and just give my quick thoughts on how good I think this is for each person. For Eva, from Mary down, we got Sweetie Pie Honey Bunch, Bless Your Heart, Strong, Athletic, a Beast, Say Wasn't Sure, Interesting, Fierce as Fuck from Bianca, and Icon from Thomas. I was a little bit surprised that Bianca and Thomas had such kind words to say about Eva. They almost had the best words of anyone. And so I'm a little bit like, that feels good for Eva. I think especially looking back at Bianca and Thomas, I was like, well, I mean, they know who won the season. They didn't get to vote, but they might be up on Eva if she did win, right? So I think this is good stuff, especially, Mary gives a pretty complimentary phrase. Star gives a complimentary phrase. Not really anything bad here at all. Say said not sure, that's not great that she didn't say anything. Chrissy just says athletic, which it doesn't really give much of a connotation at all. David says strong, which is like, fine. But I'm generally a pretty good rating here. Joe, we get Daddy, That Guy, Aggressive, The Godfather, Father, a Father, Intense, Charity, she wasn't sure, Angel from Bianca, and Thomas called him hot, I believe. Now, some of these might be not 100% accurate, so if I am wrong about any of them, let me know. But this is also pretty good. I think Charity not knowing what to say about Joe is fine. Like, they barely spend any time together. That would not be surprising to me. I mean, some of these aren't like that great. I think That Guy from Star could be read in multiple ways, but particularly I think is a really good thing. I think that he's that guy. He's that guy. Like, he's the winner. So that could be good. And a really good thing I think comes from Chrissy when she calls him the Godfather. That's a really good sign, potentially, for Joe's winning chances. For Kamilla, we get sane, smart, gamer, Mighty Mouse, unassuming, badass, sneaky, queen behavior, and devil in a loving way from Thomas. Yeah, I mean, these are pretty good stuff for Kamilla. I actually think that Kamilla maybe has the best list of superlatives. They're all pretty complimentary. I don't really think any of these are negative at all for Kamilla. Once again, Bianca giving great superlatives. Queen behavior is really good for her. We also get, a lot of people call her smart. I mean, Mariko just calls her sane, which is like a good thing, but like it's not like a super connotative. So I mean, these are like good things. They're complimentary of her, but I'm not super confident in it. Kyle, this was up for debate. I think Mary said party about Kyle. Maybe she said something else, but anyways, Star says should have took me on that immunity, which I think was talking about should have took me on that reward, which not that good. We get heartwarming, conniving, strategic, unassuming, kind. I think Thomas said ass. I'm not 100% sure. And then Kevin also says kind. So kind of a mixed bag here for Kyle. Seems like people think he's a really kind, heartwarming, sweet guy. Cedric calls him strategic. Chrissy calls him conniving, which is kind of a negative connotation of strategic. Which those are maybe good that people are looking at him as not just kind, but as a player, right? But then we get should have took me on that reward, which is like, that's not that great. And Mary says, whatever Mary says, whether it's party or some people said hardy, which doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think it's hardy. Whatever it is, it's kind of like lame. It's kind of like, that's what you had to say about Kyle. Like, that's not that interesting. So I don't know about Kyle's stuff here. Mitch, Mary just snores. Star just says, and then we get cute, sweet. Cedric said, I'm speechless about Mitch and had a whole bunch of complimentary stuff. Super fan, the best, sweetie, and love muffin. So all very complimentary stuff for Mitch, but mostly, just saying that he's a nice guy. We love Mitch. He's very sweet and cute. Mary and Star did not seem to like Mitch all that much. And so I feel like these are not like great stuff for Mitch's chances. People have positive view of him, but I just think he's just a likable guy. Nothing really calling him like the closest we get is super fan from Say, but other than that, like nothing really connotating a Mitch win. And then for Shauhin, Mary goes ooh waka. Star goes poor thing. Dave says delusional. We get smart, calculating, perceptive / intentional, chameleon, vibes, also like chillest, awesomest, and puppy. So another very mixed bag for Shauhin, right? Say is calling him very perceptive. Cedric is calling him calculating. Chris calls him smart. Those are all pretty good things, right? They're viewing him as a player, as a intense strategist. But the top three, if you look, are all pretty bad. All Mary has to say is ooh waka, which is funny, but also not giving him anything interesting. Star says poor thing, which is like, ooh, that feels not good for him. Why would she say poor thing for the guy that wins? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And then David calls him delusional. And I'm like, oh, what does David know? I mean, he saw the episode, right? And Shauhin was delusional up to that point. But it's just a little bit like, it's not looking that good, and Thomas calls him puppy, which is like fine. But I feel like, Icon and Devil and even Hot are better than puppy, which it kind of doesn't really, doesn't feel like a puppy would win. Obviously, Thomas was that a long time ago, but still, all important stuff. So that's all of those superlatives. I think they're all pretty interesting. I really think the people that probably have the best groups of superlatives are Eva, Joe, and Kamilla. I probably would rank Joe third, honestly, in terms of superlatives. And then I would go Kyle, and then Shauhin, and then Mitch. I mean, I think Kyle and Shauhin's were both kind of mixed bags. But I just thought that was interesting to think about. I just want to put that out there as a clear chart for everyone to be able to take a look at, to form their opinions. So, The Godfather. Let's hope. So, that is everything that we have for the ratings this week. Final 6 for predictions. In terms of ending off the predictions for the episode. I don't honestly have a whole lot new. I gave a lot of predictions last week. I said that Mary would get voted out this week, and I was right. And my prediction last week was I thought it was going to be Mitch, then Kamilla, then Kyle, then Shauhin in third, and I said Joe would be second and Eva would win. And I still feel good about that prediction. I don't feel that bad about it. But Carson influenced me a little bit last week, and I listened to the Know-It-Alls this week, and I've seen some stuff online that I do feel like it is leading towards a Shauhin vote out next week. Almost a little bit too obvious so based on the next time on Survivor. That it definitely feels like Kyle and Kamilla are trying to set up Shauhin and get him voted out by Joe and Eva. which I do think that they will be doing that. That's my prediction. I do think that they will be trying to set up Shauhin and basically try to twist his words in a way that he didn't really mean. Maybe this, they would get him to admit that he was thinking about voting out Joe, and they twist that into, hey, Shauhin's flipping. We got to vote him out. So, I do think that that's pretty likely. I kind of think, though, honestly, it's going to backfire on them. I feel like we get the scene from Joe in the next time on Survivor where he says, something like, there are schemes going around, and I just got to figure out who they're coming from. Something like that. And that feels like, oh, they're telling him that Shauhin's scheming, but he might think that they're scheming. Who's the real one that's coming up with this stuff and scheming? Who's lying and who's telling the truth, basically? And so that's really what I think next week is going to come down to, is who's creating the schemes and who's telling the truth. So that's where I think it's going next week. I still think Shauhin is kind of giving losing finalists, but I also have always thought that Mitch really does give a losing finalist as well. So that's my prediction there. In terms of the moment where Kamilla says that she really wants one of her or Kyle to be in the final three, that honestly I'm very tossed up. That felt like a significant moment to me, but I don't really know how to predict where that's going to go. I think maybe one of them will make final three, or maybe one of them won't. I don't, like I said, I don't super think either of them are winning. They're not my top contender. But in terms of one of them making the final three, I think maybe. I don't know at this point. So I don't really have any big stakes in that confessional. In a confessional where Shauhin says that he thinks that he is playing a better game than Joe, there's a little bling, sound cue during that confessional that felt significant. And I wanted to point that out just to notice, basically. Now, I don't know what that means. I've already talked a lot about that, but it does feel to me like Shauhin is going to lose to Joe in some way. The battle is going to be lost between Shauhin and Joe, and I do think that something is going to come to a head next week, and I don't know. It's becoming harder to see them taking an easy Mitch boot next week. It doesn't feel as likely, so I kind of think maybe Mitch is on the fast track to the finale at this point. Or to the final three. It's tough to say. So in terms of my actual boot prediction for next week, if I'm going to lock it in an official prediction, I have been saying, I said Mitch last week. I kind of don't super see it because I do think Kamilla and Kyle are taking their shot next week. I don't think they're going to go for Joe. I think they're going to go for Shauhin, which is maybe going to be a mistake. They should take out Joe, but I can see where they would maybe be coming from and trying to do that. So they try to take out Shauhin and scheme against him and lie about what he's doing, basically. And I think that it's either going to backfire and one of them are going to get voted out, or they're going to get out Shauhin. If it does backfire, I honestly think it's going to be Kyle. I think Kyle seems like a potential sixth placer. I've said that sixth place is often a big, important person in a season in some way. Someone that either you're emotionally invested in or someone that gets a lot of confessionals. I believe Andy was probably the confessional leader of 47. I imagine Q was probably for a while. I think that sixth place definitely feels like where you give someone that has a lot of screen time. And so it would make a lot of sense for Kyle or Shauhin to potentially be in that spot. I think it's maybe the safe move, but it's the move that lines most in line with what I have been predicting and seeing for the end of the season, that I think it's going to be Shauhin. I'm not confident. I still think it could be Mitch, but I kind of think Joe and Eva are safe next week, which is crazy, but I kind of think they are. I'll give you this. I think Joe's going to win immunity next week. That's my first prediction. And I don't think they're going to want to target Eva for whatever reason. Maybe because she has the idol, or they just don't view her as that big of a threat at this point. And so they want to go for Shauhin. And that battle is going to come next week. And so it could be Mitch, could be Kyle. It's less likely to be Kamilla. But, it could be Kamilla. In terms of likeliness, I think of getting voted out next week, I think I would probably go Shauhin, Kyle, Mitch, Kamilla, Joe, Eva would be my ranking. And otherwise, that's about it. I'm super excited to see where the end of the season goes. Again, thank you all so much for watching. It really means a lot for you to tune in. We're going to have some really exciting ratings for you next week. We've only got one more chance to predict the winner next week in the penultimate episode of Survivor 48. So super looking forward to that. And please go check out Survivor Northwestern Into the Gauntlet. It's a super great season that I was on and helped out a lot with. So it would mean a lot to me if you go check it out. And yeah, having a blast. Survivor 48. It is what it is. Listen, I mean, the pre-merge was maybe more exciting, but I'm still having fun with it. And I'm excited to see how it all wraps up very soon. So, thank you all for watching, and stay frosty, y'all.